The slap landed at 8:47 p.m. on a Friday. By the following Monday, $340 million was already starting to bleed out, and I was sitting at home drinking coffee, waiting for it. My name is Ray Sutton. I'm 54 years old. I want to tell you about the night one woman's ego brought down an empire, and how I walked away with everything that mattered. I've spent 22 years in industrial automation software. Not the glamorous end of tech. No Silicon Valley ping pong tables. No hoodies on magazine covers. I built systems that keep pipeline networks running, that monitor pressure gauges in refineries at 3 a.m., that flag equipment failures before they become disasters. Boring, invisible, essential work. The kind of work most people don't think about until the lights go out. I joined Holt Industrial Systems back when it was a mid-sized regional shop out of Houston with decent clients and a founder who still knew what his engineers actually did. Walter Holt Sr., the original Walter, was a straight shooter. He knew the difference between a salesman and a builder. He trusted the builders. Then Walter Sr. retired, and his son took over. Walter Holt Jr. was 49 years old and had never written a line of code in his life. He had an MBA, a $12,000 watch, and the absolute certainty that running a tech company was mostly about relationships and vision. The technical stuff, that was what he paid people like me for. For a while, that worked fine. I kept my head down. I built AXIOM control suite from the ground up, started the core architecture back in 2008, actually, before I was even full-time at AS. I was freelancing then, building the logic framework on my own time, on my own equipment, because I saw a gap in the market and I wanted to solve it. When His brought me on full-time in early 2009, I brought Axiom with me. The IP transfer paperwork was something HR was supposed to handle. They never did. Nobody ever followed up. I filed it away in the back of my mind and got to work. Over the next 15 years, AXIOM became the spine of everything His did. Client contracts ran through it. Equipment monitoring, live data feeds, billing integrations, all of it sat on the architecture I'd built. The system grew more complex every year, layered with integrations I'd designed to bridge the old legacy infrastructure with the new modules. It wasn't just software anymore, it was an organism, and I was the only person who understood how all the pieces talked to each other. I tried 3 times to get budget approved for full documentation, a proper manual, step-by-step integration maps that another engineer could follow. Walter cut the budget all 3 times. Documentation wasn't revenue. Documentation didn't impress investors. That decision would cost him everything. By October of that year, His had hit a $340 million valuation. Walter threw a gala at the Post Oak Hotel in Houston. Black tie, full ballroom, open bar. Every investor, partner, and client contact in the Texas industrial tech world was on the guest list. It was Walter's moment, his dynasty validated on paper. I was there, not to celebrate. I had a critical logic error to fix. 3 hours before the scheduled live demo for the investors, the centerpiece of the whole evening, I caught a conflict buried deep in AXIOM's integration layer. The kind of conflict that looks invisible until the exact wrong moment, and then freezes every screen in the room simultaneously. If it hit during the demo in front of $100 million in potential follow-on investment, His would have looked like it was running its flagship product on duct tape. So I found a side table near the back of the ballroom, away from the noise, and I sat down with my laptop, dress shirt, no jacket, coffee going cold next to me, lines of code on the screen while the waitstaff moved around me with champagne trays. I was 2/3 through the fix when she appeared. Diana Holt, Walter's wife. Red dress, diamond earrings that probably cost more than my truck. She moved through that ballroom like a woman who had decided the room existed for her benefit, and everyone in it was there to confirm it. She stopped at my table, looked me up and down once, and said, I need the projector set up for my husband's speech. The event coordinator said IT handles it. Go take care of that. She thought I was hired help for the evening, contract IT support. The kind of person you wave at and expect to move. I looked up from the screen. Ma'am, I'm not with the venue. I'm Ray Sutton, Senior Systems Architect at HASA. I'm in the middle of fixing a critical error in the demo system. You'll want to find the event coordinator directly. They can help you. I said it the way you'd explain something to a reasonable person. Calm, no edge. The table next to us went quiet. A couple of board members glanced over. Diana's expression didn't shift. She just looked at me the way some people look at a chair that's in the wrong place, mildly annoyed, already decided. I don't care what your title is. I told you to handle the projector. I can't step away from this right now. I said, I'm sorry. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. She slapped me across the face, hard, my head turned with it. The laptop on the table rattled. The room went silent. I didn't move. I didn't stand up. I sat there with the sting spreading across my cheek and I looked at her. Not angry, just steady. She pointed one finger at me and said, You won't have a job in this city by morning. Then she walked away. Walter arrived at my table 3 minutes later. He came in fast, tie still straight, one arm already around Diana's waist before he even looked at me. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask anyone nearby what they'd seen. He just swept a cold look across the table and said, Sutton, you're done. Security will walk you out. I stood up slowly. The red mark on my cheek was still hot. I picked up my laptop, closed it, and tucked it under my arm. Walter, I said, there's a critical error in the AXIOM demo build. If nobody fixes it in the next 2 hours, the live presentation is going to freeze in front of every investor in this room. He looked at me like I'd just tried to negotiate a raise. That's not your problem anymore. Get out. His niece, Gwen Holt, was 25 years old and had been HR manager for about 8 months. She'd gotten the job the same way his son Preston had gotten VP of operations, because her last name was close enough to the right one. Gwen sent the termination email before I made it to the parking garage. 15 minutes, system access revoked, badge deactivated. 22 years closed out in the time it takes to eat lunch. I sat in my truck in the parking garage for a while, the engine off. The garage quiet except for the distant sound of the Gala going on above me, muffled music, the hum of a crowd that had no idea what had just happened. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't devastated. What I felt sitting there in the dark with the laptop on the passenger seat was something close to clarity. The kind of calm that comes when something you've half expected for years finally just happens. I thought about 22 years. I thought about the nights I stayed late while Walter Jr. was at charity dinners. I thought about the 3 times I'd asked for documentation budget and been told it wasn't a priority. I thought about AXIOM, the architecture I'd started building on my own kitchen table in 2008, before IS had even made me an offer, before I'd signed a single piece of paper with them. I thought about the IP assignment paperwork that HR was supposed to file in 2009, the paperwork nobody had ever completed. I pulled out my phone and called a labor attorney I'd met at an industry conference 2 years earlier. Good man, straight talker. It was a Friday night and he picked up on the 3rd ring. We talked for 40 minutes. When I hung up, I drove home, made a pot of coffee, and opened the laptop. I wasn't going to fix their demo, but I had work to do. The demo crashed at 9:34 p.m. I found out later from a former colleague who was in the room. The logic conflict I'd been halfway through fixing hit exactly when Walter stepped to the podium to show the investors AXIOM's live monitoring dashboard. Every screen went dark simultaneously. 30 seconds of silence. Then the polite, uncomfortable sound of people in expensive suits pretending not to notice. Walter's team managed a surface patch over the weekend. By Monday morning, IS put out an internal message saying the technical issue had been resolved and operations were fully stable. Walter apparently told the board the transition away from my role had been smoother than expected. He reportedly said, and I heard this from 2 different people, that he was glad to have finally cleared out some dead weight. Monday afternoon, his new lead engineer sent a message to the CTO, Stable System Holding. No issues, Walter celebrated. I heard he opened a bottle of scotch in his office. He had about 48 hours left to enjoy it. The outside engineers IS had brought in were sharp on paper. One had a PhD from MIT. 2 others had spent years at major enterprise software firms. They understood modern systems. What they didn't understand, what nobody at IS understood except me, was the layer underneath AXIOM's surface architecture. The old legacy infrastructure from 2009 and 2011 that I'd hand-bridged into the new system. Those bridges weren't documented anywhere. They existed in my code and in my head, and nowhere else. When the new team started probing deeper to build a proper long-term patch, they hit the first of those bridges. They didn't recognize what it was. They tried to reroute around it. Axiom's security layer read the rerouting as an unauthorized intrusion attempt and responded the way I had designed it to respond. It began a staged lockdown. Every 24 hours, another module encrypted and went dark. The system wasn't crashing. It was closing itself, methodically, like a building locking its doors 1 floor at a time. By Wednesday morning, the client-facing dashboard started going offline. By Thursday, 3 of ISSI's largest accounts, pipeline operators in West Texas and Oklahoma, were calling in to report they had lost access to their monitoring systems entirely. Equipment alerts weren't coming through. Maintenance schedules were frozen. One client had a crew standing idle on a job site because the work order system was locked. In the ISSI ACE command center, the monitoring screens had turned red. The new lead engineer stood in front of a wall of error messages and delivered the news that nobody in that building wanted to hear. The system required biometric authorization from the original architect to reverse the lockdown. Without that, every forced entry attempt would accelerate the encryption. At full lockdown, AXIOM would wipe its own core data permanently as a final security measure. They had no way in, and they were running out of time. Walter called me on day 8. I let it go to voicemail. He called again on day 9. Voicemail. Day 10, I picked up. He started with listen. That one word told me everything about where his head was. Not Ray, I owe you an apology. Not I made a mistake. Just listen, the word people use when they want something and can't bring themselves to admit it. He talked for about a minute, said the situation had gotten complicated, said there were some system issues the new team was working through, said he wanted to discuss bringing me back on a consulting basis to assist with the transition. His voice had that particular quality of a man who is used to controlling rooms and is suddenly aware he can't control this one. I let him finish. Then I said, have your legal team call my attorney. And I hung up. I found out later that Diana grabbed his phone on a follow-up attempt and got through to me directly. I don't know how I'd been screening calls, but she got through. She didn't lead with an apology either. She told me I had sabotaged the company's systems, that she would see me in court for every dollar of damage, and that I would be apologizing on my knees before this was over. I waited until she finished. Diana, I said, the only people getting on their knees are going to be you and Walter, in front of your investors, in front of your board, and in front of a judge. I hung up and blocked both numbers. While Walter and Diana were calling me, my attorney was already 3 steps ahead of them. The night of the gala, before I went to sleep, I had written down everything I remembered about the evening, times, exact words, names of people standing nearby. A former colleague who'd been at the gala had already texted me. He'd recorded the slap on his phone, 32 seconds of clear video, good audio. Diana's face visible, my face visible, the board members at the next table visible in the background. My attorney filed on 2 tracks simultaneously. Wrongful termination, a straightforward case given the circumstances and the lack of any documented performance issues in 22 years, and battery for the slap. Texas law is clear on both counts. The IP matter took more digging, but what we found was cleaner than I'd expected. The original AXIOM architecture, the core logic framework, the foundational modules had been built between March 2008 and January 2009. I had development logs, version histories, and dated files on a personal hard drive going back to the first week I started the project. My employment contract with HIS was signed in February 2009. The IP assignment addendum that was supposed to transfer my pre-existing work to ISH had been drafted, initialed by one HR staffer, and then never countersigned, never notarized, never filed. It sat in a folder in a filing cabinet in the old ISHIAIAS for 15 years, incomplete and legally void. HIS had been operating their entire platform on architecture they didn't legally own. My attorney filed the IP dispute with USPTO on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, ISS's legal team had gone very quiet. That kind of quiet, that means they've just looked at something they didn't want to see. Meanwhile, the collapse was accelerating. The 3 client breach of contract penalties came in fast. $4.2 million total across the 3 pipeline accounts that had lost system access. Those clients didn't wait. They had operational deadlines, safety obligations, regulatory requirements. When AXIOM went dark, they started documenting losses immediately. The institutional investors who had been in that ballroom on Gala night were now getting calls from their own boards. 2 of them hired outside counsel and filed suit against Walter personally for breach of fiduciary duty. The argument was straightforward. The CEO had made a personal, emotionally driven decision to fire an irreplaceable systems architect at a critical company event with no investigation, no process, and no consideration of operational risk. That decision directly caused the system failure, the client penalties, and the stock collapse. Walter's $340 million valuation had shed 68% in 11 weeks. On paper, IS had lost more than $230 million in value since that Friday night at the Post Oak. Then the board launched its own internal investigation. That's when Preston Holt's credentials came apart. Preston had been listed in his company materials as holding a mechanical engineering degree from UT Austin. He'd attended for a year and a half, then quietly left. Nobody at IS had ever run a background check on the CEO's son. Why would they? His last name was on the building. When the investigation surfaced the discrepancy, Preston resigned within 48 hours. The story leaked to 2 industry publications the following week. In the Texas industrial software world, which is smaller and tighter than most people realize, it spread fast. Walter was now managing a system failure, 3 client lawsuits, 2 investor lawsuits, an IP dispute, a wrongful termination case, a battery charge against his wife, and a front-page story about his son's fake degree. All simultaneously, all traceable back to one decision made in 30 seconds at a hotel gala. I followed most of it from my kitchen table in Northwest Houston. Coffee in the morning, work in the afternoon. I wasn't celebrating, I wasn't angry, I was busy. Because while HIS was burning, I was building. 2 engineers I'd worked with at HIS for over a decade had reached out within a week of my termination. Both had resigned shortly after, not because I asked them to, but because they'd watched what happened and drawn their own conclusions about what kind of company they were working for. Both were good. Both were people I trusted completely. We started meeting at my house on weekday evenings, whiteboard on the wall in my living room. 3 mugs of coffee, a list of everything we knew how to do and everything the market still needed. By November, we had a name, Sutton Systems LLC. We didn't have a fancy office. We didn't have a pitch deck. We had a whiteboard, a stack of legal pads, and a combined 60-plus years of knowing exactly how industrial automation software actually works in the field, not in a conference room, not in a demo, but at 2 a.m. when a pipeline monitor throws an alert and somebody needs answers fast. We rented a small office space in Northwest Houston in December. Nothing impressive. Drop ceiling, fluorescent lights, a coffee maker that took 10 minutes to brew a full pot, but it was ours. Every decision made in that room was made by people who understood the work, not people who'd inherited a company and were coasting on a name. We spent the first 2 months doing something most startups skip entirely. We documented everything. Every architecture decision, every integration method, every failsafe. If either of my partners got hit by a bus tomorrow, the third one could rebuild the whole system from scratch using what we'd written down. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, or rather, I'd watched Walter learn it the hard way on my behalf. We weren't in a hurry. We had enough between us to run lean for a year, and we had something more valuable than funding. We had a reputation, built across 2 decades in a market where people talk to each other and remember who showed up when things went wrong. The legal side resolved in stages. The wrongful termination case settled in month 4. ISI's attorneys didn't want a trial. The video evidence was clean. The 22-year employment record was spotless. And a Texas jury watching 32 seconds of a CEO's wife slapping a senior engineer at a company gala was not a situation Walter's legal team wanted to navigate. They wrote a check for $180,000. I signed the settlement and moved on. Diana's battery charge was handled separately. The civil penalty came in at $85,000. Her attorney tried to negotiate it down. The judge didn't move. Word traveled through Houston's business social circles quickly. The charity board she sat on started finding reasons not to schedule her for events. The women who used to compete for a spot in her photographs stopped returning her calls. She'd built her entire social identity on being the wife of a powerful man. When the power started draining out, the identity went with it. The IP dispute took the longest but landed the hardest. After 4 months of back and forth, his legal team came to the table with a settlement offer. They had looked at the development logs, the dated files, the incomplete assignment paperwork, and the USPTO filing, and they had reached the same conclusion my attorney had reached in the first week. They didn't own what they thought they owned. The terms were straightforward. His could continue using AX EOM Control Suite under an annual licensing agreement. The fee was substantial, not punitive but real, enough to matter on their balance sheet every year. Or they could stop using AX EOM entirely and attempt to rebuild from scratch without the one person who understood the architecture. Given the state of their engineering team and the 11-week collapse they'd just lived through, that option wasn't serious. They signed the license agreement. My name was on it as the IP holder. Walter had to sell 30% of his personal stake in ISECs to cover the combined legal exposure. The man who had stood at that podium in the post-Oak ballroom toasting his $340 million empire was now a minority shareholder in a damaged company, answering to a board that no longer trusted his judgment and investors who were watching every move he made. I heard from a former colleague that Walter had aged visibly in 6 months, that his office, which used to be full of people, was mostly quiet now, that he arrived earlier and left later and didn't throw parties anymore. I don't have any satisfaction in that. I'm not built for it. What happened to Walter was the result of his own decisions, compounded by years of surrounding himself with family instead of competence and confusing a title with actual authority. I didn't engineer his downfall. I just stopped holding his ceiling up. Sutton Systems signed its first client contract in month 6. A mid-size pipeline operator out of Midland, West Texas, one of the 3 accounts had lost during the AXIOM collapse. They knew our work. They'd worked with me directly for years. When they heard we'd started our own shop, their operations director called before we'd even finished setting up the website. The contract value in year 1 was more than I'd earned in my last 3 years at ISIS combined. By the end of our first year, we had 4 clients, 2 additional hires, and a pipeline of conversations with 3 more prospects. We weren't growing fast. We were growing right. Every system we built was documented from day 1. Every client knew exactly who was working on their account and why. Nobody was coasting on a family name or a borrowed credential. My 2 partners became co-owners of everything we built. That was the deal from the first conversation. No hierarchy based on who started the company. Equity based on contribution. I'd spent 22 years watching what happens when ownership and competence get separated. I wasn't going to build that again. I still drive the same truck, still wear dress shirts without jackets, still drink too much coffee and stay later than I need to. The difference is that now when I stay late, it's because I want to. There's a certain kind of man who spends his career being the most important person in the room without anyone knowing it, who holds things together quietly, year after year, while louder people take the credit and cash the bigger checks, who gets passed over, talked past, and occasionally slapped, and still shows up the next morning because the work matters. I spent 22 years being that man for someone else's company. I'm done with that part. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak one. Sometimes the guy in the corner with the laptop, fixing the problem nobody else even sees, that's the man who holds the keys to everything. They just didn't know it until the doors were already locked. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the loudest voice or the biggest title. It's the one who quietly built the thing everyone else depends on, and who finally decided to stop pretending that doesn't matter. When you spend decades doing work that holds everything together, getting fired isn't the end of your story. It's just the moment the world finds out what you were actually worth.